I'm not a service dog trainer or a board member of a service dog organization, nor am I affiliated with any service dog company's operations. I am an end user. And upon my release from CAF in 2016, I relocated to British Columbia, and this is where my difficulties began with other service dog providers, local businesses, government agencies, local civic and provincial government. This is when the roadblocks to having a service dog began and daily. At that time in BC, the government was lobbied by a single service dog provider, ADI IGDF. And the new Service Act was implemented exactly at the same time that the Alberta Act was implemented. Both Alberta and BC have nearly identical acts. All of these organizations were part of the CGSB process and did not disclose this to the BC government or CGSB. I was being excluded entry to public buildings and most services because my service dog was not from ADI or IGDF. I was being excluded. All your witnesses have gone on to praise how good the BC test is. And I'd like to point out that my service dog was required to pass this test when it was a puppy to see if it would actually be entered into the program. The test in BC costs $200 to certify your service dog. However, the BC test is an obedience test and does not assess my service dog's ability to do what it was trained for. Those veterans or the public who get a service dog from ADI, IGDF preferred member provider are not required to pay this fee. The former Speaker of the House of the BC Legislature and current MLA, Linda Reid, is the president of the BC Alberta Guide Dogs, an ADI IGDF member organization. And MLA Scott Hamilton was on the board of directors of Pacific Assistance Dogs. Both were involved with this committee making sweeping changes to the Act in BC, and subsequently these two providers were the only approved providers in BC under the Act. There are currently now 3. The Director of Corporate Policy for BC, Toby Louie, wrote the Act and wrote policy for PADS as well. As you can see, there's a huge conflict of interest as no one involved with these service dog providers recused themselves from any debates or work on this Act. And this is a perfect example of how these service dog providers insert themselves into government policy. The Minister of Public Safety currently, the Minister MLA Mike Farnsworth, has stated that the Service Dog Act in BC is voluntary. However, if one wishes to be afforded all the benefits of the Act, we need to have a service ID card for BC. On the back of this card, it states, in possession of a certified guide dog or service dog is granted access rights to public places and tenancy rights. The Canadian Charter already affords us these rights. The province also states that it does not certify service dogs. However, on the front of the service dog ID card, it says, certified by the province of BC. This past Christmas, my service dog became ill and suddenly died. Currently, I'm second guessing whether or not to get another service dog because of the predatory behavior of service dog providers and the restrictions in BC. Many service dog providers in this country are predatory to some degree and are only looking to advance their agendas. If the veteran is the purpose for these psychiatric dogs, it's the veterans that are consistently stuck in the middle of the fight between providers. 10 years ago, there were only about 8 service dog providers in Canada. There are now about 132. So you tell me it's not about the money. One of the biggest difficulties facing veterans is the misuse, misinformation, and downright dishonesty in the terminology used by this unregulated industry in Canada. Bill Ralph of Wounded Warriors Canada stated in his testimony that their standard falls in line with ADI, which is accredited. Ms. Forms also stated that national service dogs were accredited by Imagine Canada. I'd like to point out that Imagine Canada only accredits charitable organizations' operations. They do not accredit production, standards, or training of service dogs. Sheila O'Brien was asked about ADI accreditation and stated ADI is peer-to-peer reviewed, not by an independent third party. There are no accredited providers anywhere internationally. This is not only misleading to the public, but to governments. And when MPs, MLAs, or MPPs use this language, it only reinforces the misinformation. Service dog providers in Canada have inserted themselves into all levels of government to press their agendas. And some MPs, even on this committee, through advocacy, whether directly or indirectly, are not doing the veteran a service. On the contrary, it's a disservice. Our member of parliament from South Surrey White Rock, MP Finley, is the treasurer and a direct board member of BC Alberta Guide Dogs, which is an ADI member, pressing to make their standard, which isn't published or available to the public, the law of the land. Phil Ralph also referred to the ADI standard. Nowhere in the Act is there a standard for BC. In fact, the only standard available on the ADI site is a code of conduct for member organizations. The ADI IGDF standard is proprietary and they do not release this to the public or to anyone. It's for their members only. The Director General of Policy Research, Ms. Baird, stated that the CGSB study failed because members could not come to consensus. I would have to disagree with this assessment completely. The fact that the CGSB was shut down for a time and investigated because of this process is alarming. The service dog industry cannot be relied upon to make a national standard. There's too much animosity between providers to play nice in the sandbox and too much money to be lost with these personalities. Currently, the Human Research Standard Organization, accredited by SCC, is working on the development of a national standard. VAC was invited to participate in the study, but they stated they were not able to participate. This leads me to believe that the department plans to do something different. VAC needs to stay out of this independent process completely and allow it to proceed unimpeded. MP Wagentall asked a question last week. Where did Wounded Warriors get the professional ability to determine whether or not they comply with standards, and how are Wounded Warriors qualified to do that? This question was not answered by Mr. Cousineau, so I'm going to answer it now. Wounded Warriors Canada is not qualified to determine compliance of standards. Wounded Warriors Canada is not a service dog provider. They have no trainers or master dog trainers. They only provide funding to third-party providers, and they are not in a position to oversee or front a standard process. I would like to thank the member for North Island Powell River for mentioning my difficulties at being homeless with my service dog. On January 1st, 2016, when the BC legislature put into force the BC Guide and Service Dog Act, this act does not recognize any service dog teams or providers that were not trained or who are not affiliated with ADI or IGDF, and is in complete violation of a Veterans Charter of Rights, Canadian Human Rights Act, and the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This act prevents me from obtaining housing in BC and continues to be a huge barrier for veterans housing as well as public access. I am not allowed access to any provincial offices, travel on board passenger decks of BC ferries with my service dog, or take public transit. This is one of the main driving forces that forced me in May of 2018 onto the streets. Because I don't fit the criteria for the BC Service Dog Act. Mr. Cousineau stated that the BC Act has been upheld by the Canadian Human Rights Commission, when in fact it has failed several times with human rights complaints against BC ferries, residential tenancy, denial of access at Costco, and including my own denial of public access. But because the BC Commission makes everyone sign NDAs, none of these cases can be discussed. And the BC Act states that the BC Human Rights Code will prevail over the Service Dog Act, and it has on several occasions. That clause allows the Act to get around any human rights violations. So the Act is in complete misrepresentation of what it's meant to be providing. I'm just about done.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
In BC, anyone can have a service dog because the BC certification is only an obedience test. And a note from your family doctor or nurse practitioner is the only thing that's required. Few people are aware that the psychiatric service dog program was first initiated in the late 1990s and just after 9/11 by the Honorable Elijah Harper, not the national service dogs as stated by Ms. O'Brien. It was Elijah who was instrumental as a senior member and elder of the Red Sucker Lake Band in Manitoba. It was Elijah's foresight and vision that saw the coming storm and the suffering of veterans coming back from the first rotations. So why this committee has not invited the two largest service dog providers in Canada is baffling to me. There is currently a national standard, unofficial, published in Canada. And this standard was written by the former director of the Standards Council of Canada, Michael M. Bourassa. And I can talk about that in questions.
Thank you.
In closing, I ask that the committee take all the information from service dog providers with a grain of salt. Do not rely on the infighting within this multi-million-dollar unregulated industry. Yes, veterans get dogs for free, but somebody has to be paid to rear, feed, kennel, and train these dogs. There's two camps in the service dog world in Canada, ADI, IGDF, and the MSAR standard. Thank you. That's all I got.